Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the December 9th, 2024 meeting of the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Last meeting of the year. We have in chambers members Lisa Holmes, Rachel Graham, and me, Veronica Pillar, and on Zoom members Annie Corman, Nick Bennett, Travis Brooks, Jennifer Micah, and Ken Clark. Chief Equity and Diversity Officer Charlene Holmes is also joining us in chambers. As for introductions, we all know each other by this point. Interrupt me if that is not the case. I do want to name, though please interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll be quite embarrassed, that this is the last Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee meeting for both Lisa Holmes and Ken Clark, as terms turn over at their terms are expiring at the end of this year. And so I want to thank both of you for your long service on this committee, and especially Lisa, you were one of the founding members of You weren't? Okay. How long have you been in this committee?
Gosh, I came on maybe a year or two after it was founded. But yeah, I wasn't a founding member. Close.
Okay, not a founding member, one of the earliest members, yeah. And Dr. Clark, how long have you been on WDIC?
I think pretty much from the time I arrived in November 2017.
Okay, yeah, so also several years. Well,
yes.
Thank you both. More
Thank you.
than I can say with words as to what in the world we'll do without you. That's a discussion item under number 7. So moving along, are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I don't have any. Chair's report. Before I get to the main item, I want to say that typically the chair of this committee or someone from this committee is supposed to report back to the Budget Capital and Personnel Committee every month. I'm not available to do it this month, nor am I available to do it in January, although Katrina can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Budget Capital and Personnel, BCP, is going to meet, is meeting later this week, but then they will also have their January meeting before WDIC meets again. So no one necessarily needs to go update them that second time, but I am in search of a volunteer. If anyone would anyone be available and open to giving the WDIC report at the Budget Capital and Personnel Committee this week, which I believe is on Thursday, 9 to 11 a.m. Is that right? That's right, yeah. And what it would involve is just, there's somewhere in the agenda, there's the agenda item of Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee Chair update or something along those lines, and you can just come on and give a brief little summary of whatever it is we do at this meeting today and anything else WDIC related you think is relevant, and I'm happy to help with that. It's not a huge deal.
You said this coming Thursday?
Like 2-3 days from today.
I'm going to be at the meeting. I don't want to take the opportunity away from anyone else who would like to do it, but if I'm going to already be at the meeting, I would be glad to, if that would be helpful.
Okay, sure. Would anyone else like to relieve Lisa's head from wearing too many hats? Right, not seeing any rousing enthusiasm, so thank you, Lisa. All right, moving on to the main thing here, the Facing Race report. Several people, including at least a few around this table, from Tompkins County, the organization, not to mention Tompkins County, the county at large, attended Race Forward's biannual, that's right, every 2 years, Facing Race conference just a couple weeks ago in St. Louis, and it was fantastic. There were about 4,000 attendees total, many breakout sessions, so the different attendees learned a bunch of different things, and I can speak for me, this is my second time going, but my first time with a bunch of people from my same organization, and it was really good to have this real-time engagement with new people and new presentations and being able to discuss and debrief with people who also work at Tompkins County at the same time. I have a handful of relevant takeaways I'd like to share from breakouts that I was in, but I don't want to babble forever at once. So I'm wondering if anyone else would like to more meaningfully kick us off with sharing your experience or anything you think is important. And you don't have to share, but I know Charlene was there. Charlene did a ton of the legwork, even getting the rest of us to go. So thank you very much for that. Rachel was there, Travis was there. I'm not sure if anyone else currently in the meeting was.
Start off if you want.
Yeah, go for it, Rachel.
Sure. So I'll just start by thanking Charlene for making sure we could all get there and making sure we had the funds for that. It was a great conference attended by over 4,000 people in St. Louis. The highlight for me, I went on a historical bus tour that they took us all over St. Louis and the surrounding areas, and they really wanted to focus on the rich history of the area with a focus on some of the racial complexities of that history. And so they had a combination of historians and organizers that led the bus tour. There were 3 buses with about 45 folks on each bus. And, they started talking about the Native communities that lived there before colonization, and then they talked about how it went back and forth between Spanish and French rule before the Louisiana Purchase. And then it's right on the Mississippi, so, we talked about how it was a slave state on one side of the Mississippi and a free state on the other side of the Mississippi. And we got to meet people in different neighborhoods that talked to us about their neighborhoods. We learned a lot about gentrification happening in certain areas. It was very clear, just visually, where redlining had occurred and there was clear divestment from certain areas. They took us to Ferguson and Kinloch. They took us to Cherokee. It was really amazing. And then for the sessions, I had 2 favorite sessions. One was over, under, around, and through the many ways to advance racial equity in the face of legal attacks. That was really great, just as, we go into the new year and, we don't really know what's going to happen with DEI work. And there are states like California who in, 96, Proposition 209 was passed, which basically banned affirmative action in the public sector there. So this is something that a lot of places have already kind of navigated doing this work. And we just talked about, changing language and how you can continue the work even in the face of possible legal attacks. Lots of great resources were shared there as well. The second session I'll share about was equity-centered coaching, which I found really helpful, and a lot of good resources I brought back from that also. It was taught by, the conversation was led by the Department of Race and Equity from the city of San Diego. And there were some folks from Multnomah County also who have a really great, a lot of online resources there too. So those were the big highlights for me. Thanks,
Rachel. Charlene.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came. Ithaca and Tompkins County was represented with over 40 people at this conference. So it was really nice to see the cross section. We were like the colors of Benetton. It was great. So many different folks from different walks of life coming together and representing this area in a way that we often don't get to see it on the day-to-day was inspiring for me. But the largest highlight was it marked the 10-year anniversary of Mike Brown Jr.'s death and the rise in Ferguson, the uprising in Ferguson. And for those of you all who joined this racial equity, anti-racism journey, that was pivotal for a lot of us. It wasn't George Floyd. It was Mike Brown Jr. And the ways in which we look at law enforcement and how I recognize that in the Missouri and even in St. Louis, they're still dealing with disproportionate impacts on communities of color at the hands of law enforcement, to the point where they were rallying around and trying to lobby to get us to go to their legislative meetings while we were there. So that was really inspiring. And another part that was inspiring was that I got to take a photo, and some of us got to hold hands with Mike Brown Jr.'s dad and mom and grandmother. They were there with an exhibit about his life, and they told the story. And one of the things that sat with me was that his stepmom said 3 days before his murder, he had graduated from high school, and they went out to eat to celebrate. And he told his family, I'm gonna change the world. I have to leave, but I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna change my city. And you wouldn't imagine that it would be someone's murder that would be able to affect change. But that sat with me. It sat with me because sometimes we don't see people's humanity. We don't see that people are human. They're not objects. People don't own people. And some of our systems and structures, policies and procedures, they are harming human beings. And we need to really, really take a deep dive and look at that for those of us who have institutional power. It's our job. And so that sat with me, and that was the biggest highlight for me.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you for bringing that back here. Travis, you were also at Facing Race. Do you want to share anything?
I want to say no, because I just want to sit with what Charlene just expressed. But every year I go in my capacity at GIAC, and we take teams out there. So, living in Ithaca, being here for 30-something years, I go to Facing Race. The first thing for me is, and it happened, of course, again this year, is just being around the thousands of people that look like me. For those who experience that every day, I can't express to you how powerful it is to walk through buildings and hotels and the streets and just be around folks that you identify with in so many different ways. There's a lot of strength in it. There's a lot of lifting in that is really powerful. And then, of course, to have young people feel that, to have young people see that, it's just a very supportive and powerful feeling. I don't remember all of the different breakout opportunities that I went to, but what I enjoyed next from being around people that look like me is sitting down at the end of the day over dinner with the young people and talking to them about their experiences at the different breakout sessions. They're old enough, we let them pick what they want to go to and where they want to go. And just the conversation and the level of awareness, the increased level of awareness for them. And I took relatively young staff with me this time as well. A friend of mine lives in St. Louis. He lived out here for a few years, so I didn't do the bus ride, but he came and got me one evening and took me to show me St. Louis and talked to me about the redlining and the gentrification. And we went through his neighborhood and, it's a Republican state, and we go through his neighborhood. We stopped at a gas station. He explained to me what it looks like at night. This is like early evening, and it just is. You're here for a period of time in Ithaca. You go to other cities, other places, but I haven't been to the Midwest, and in this way, and it was a different experience, and. So like seeing the gentrification, seeing what redlining did to this community for decades, it was deep. But I needed to be around 3,500 people that looked like me for a week. I needed that really bad. Instead of a celebration, it was somewhat of a we were hoping going into the election that Facing Race would be this amazing celebration after the election. And it wasn't, but you can see the strength and you can see the determination. The first night and the closing, the poems and the speakers. It was I don't want to say it was a good time, but it was needed time. And it was nice to see so many people from this area out there.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. Thanks for sharing all of that. When I went to Facing Race 2 years ago, and I went like kind of by myself, I remember having the thought at some point of, oh, this is not for me. This is sort of it's not the same, but a flip side of there's so many Black and brown people in one place. And I have the privilege of usually being in the racial majority, and kind of this unstated of, things and presentations are kind of for me or for a white audience unconsciously. And at some point during that convening, it was like a valuable taste for me to be like, this isn't for me. I was welcome and included, but not meant to be the center, and actually not the center, which is good. I wanted to share a few things, sort of like, I guess, public engagement, government things that I got out of some of the breakout groups I went to, and I'll try to tie this back to, Charlene, I wish I wrote down what you said, although I could listen back, that our systems and structures, policies and procedures are hurting human beings, and those of us with institutional power need to work to change that. The first day, went to a couple sessions that were about essentially embedding equity in the built environment, like physical buildings and infrastructure. And one of them was about disability justice. which involved people. One point that stuck with me was someone bringing up a physically disabled person bringing up, quote, "My body doesn't depress me, society does. When I have my access needs met, I'm functionally not disabled." And later in that session, we talked about what meaningful public engagement is. And when you say that, meaningful for who? Like, helpful to the government, sure, but also there's a lot of people, and sometimes the same people or members of the same communities that get asked for input over and over again and don't necessarily see benefit from the time they take and the work they do to give the input. And then there was another session with some folks who had done a lot of research in inclusive practices informing capital project decisions and other things. They named 6 practices for building a more inclusive community: self-work, groundwork, program work, coalition work, systems work, and ecosystems work. And they had definitions for all of these that I'm not gonna take the time to go through, but I found it helpful to be given like names for things, because when you name an aspect of something, you can focus on it. And so I appreciated that. The next day I went to a different similar session about negotiating equity in community projects, not necessarily capital projects. They had 8 different sort of dimensions to equity: procedural, distributive, recognitional, restorative justice, social, structural, representational, and interactional. And even just the exercise of finding examples of all of those was helpful for my brain. They also really emphasized that process dictates outcomes. And within that, there was a bunch of concrete suggestions of how can you create a process to, for instance, design a capital project or capital program that meaningfully incorporates people's needs. And here at Tompkins County, we've got like 3 big building projects in line very soon. So this is all like, we are going to be doing some building. And so now is a good time, I think, to think about how to make it equitable. Another session, just the one tidbit from it was it introduced me to the phrase better off measures, as in like performance metrics that you might measure in something. Can you make them better off measures, as in how do we measure, is anyone better off and by how much, as opposed to how much did we do or how well did we do it, or like, not like we gave this many presentations to this many people, but is anyone better off, which of course requires some thinking. And the last session that I loved, and J.R. Claiborne was there too, so we could both talk to you about it, was with a couple people from the town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which in a lot of ways seems very similar to Ithaca from how they introduced it at the beginning. And they talked about incorporating restorative circles into their government work. And I had a little familiarity with like circle practice, as in like people getting in a circle and talking, although there's more to it than that. And I was kind of like, wow, you can do that in government. But yes, and they are doing it. They emphasized that to make that happen, you have to build infrastructure. And they had a bunch of toolkits and guiding documents for things. And this is totally an idea that Charlene says to us all the time, but you know, it's helpful to hear it again. And to see examples of, I mean, I didn't read their documents, but they pointed back to them, like the reason that we were able to like get people to agree to do community circles for this thing was because we could point back at this document and say, hey, like it says in this like whatever plan that we're gonna do this, that, or the other. And they said that they've used circles around issues ranging from mediating between tennis and pickleball of who gets to use the courts, all the way up to like police violence and serious harm issues. So they're very flexible. They say they're good at naturally like alleviating the sometimes disruptive forces of, say, like the one person who takes up all the air in the room, or maybe not a disruptive force, but like someone who has a lot to express but is shy to say any of it. Those people can often be drawn out in a circle form, in the format of a circle, in a way that they might not by like stand up at the mic and talk to a bunch of legislators and have it recorded. So that was awesome and something I'd like to learn more about. And in general, like a lot of these examples of, oh, other governments are doing this thing that seems like it'd be useful, and there's people coming to talk about it and say, hey, hit us up to like learn how you can implement this too, was real valuable. So thanks for sending us, Charlene. Any other thoughts, questions, feedback about facing race? Rachel.
So this is like sort of related, but sort of not. So when I got back, I was talking to my daughter who lives in Chicago, and she's an organizer there. I was telling her about the conference and about the bus tour and just how great the people of St. Louis were. And she recommended a documentary called The Pruitt-Igoe Myth. And I watched that. It's fascinating. It is about the first federally funded public housing that was ever built, was built in the city of St. Louis. It was huge. I don't remember how many people lived there, but it was huge. And they interview people who lived there. It was only there, so it was federally funded, but not federally maintained. So the maintenance went downhill pretty quickly of this building, or these buildings. And within 2 decades, it was torn down, and it's still a vacant lot about 2 or 3 blocks from the conference center that we were in. And I reached out to the person that did my bus tour to ask, did we happen to go by Pruitt-Igoe? Because I don't remember hearing or learning about it. And she said that we didn't drive by it, but it would have been just a few blocks north of the conference center. So I pulled it up on Google Earth, and I could see exactly where it was. And it's a really interesting documentary if you're interested in learning more about it.
Thanks for sharing that. What's the name of the documentary again?
The Pruitt-Igoe Myth.
How do you spell Pruitt-Igoe?
P-R-U-I-T-T and then I-G-O-E.
Thank you. I'll look that up. Anything else on this topic? Going once, twice, gone. Thank you all for engaging in this space and sharing and listening. Moving along, we've got minutes approval from October 23rd. Could I get a mover of the minutes? Rachel moves. Would anyone? Lisa seconds. Discussion about the minutes. Are we ready to vote? All right. We'll do a roll call vote. I'll go Zoom first in the order I see you, which you don't know, sorry, and then in person. Nick.
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
And Ken.
Yes.
Sorry, I should use your longer names. Rachel.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That carries unanimously. Next, reports and updates. Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, Charlene Holmes.
Hi, everyone. I have a lot of updates for you, so bear with me. My first update is that JEDI has officially concluded its reading and discussion group. I don't want to overlap with our co-chairs, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that our goal is to assess and approach how we we might be able to approach this differently in the future to enhance our ability to reach more staff and provide more opportunities for professional development that are built into our work day. Right now, the interns are working on aggregating the data around the surveys that went out during our reading and discussion groups to provide us with a little bit of qualitative and quantitative data. And so that will be coming your way soon. The next update is our institutionalizing equity report. I believe that we are almost there to distribute this to our department heads and leadership to provide feedback, provide us with their scope of work, make sure that this aligns and allows for them to operate within the guidance easily. And then we'll go into next year where we are slated for a general meeting, as well as some open office hours to work with department heads on building their equity indicators into their work plans. That affects WDIC in that a part of our institutionalizing equity report guidance is that departments will choose their mode of updates for WDIC. So 2025 and beyond WDIC will need to come up with their scheduling plan on how they would like for departments to provide updates. Right now, we are allowing for departments to either write a one-pager with info about how they've been tracking or, measuring or identify their equity indicators, or for the department heads that would like to come and provide a presentation, they would be able to do that too. So we want to make sure that we flesh out what the process is going to be from WDIC so that it is equitable across the board and each department is going to go through the same process. So that's going to be very important for us to identify the process so it doesn't vary across departments. The next thing is the 2025 MWBE conference that will be held in Rochester. I've been asked to sit on their committee and also chair the Southern Tier Committee, which is asked to identify an MBE, a WBE, and an MWBE to win an award in Rochester, March 31st, April 1st, and April 2nd.
Could you just say for the public what?
Yes. MWBE is Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprises. Businesses and enterprises, excuse me. This is a New York State program. If you'd like to find out more information, you can look up Article 15. It's in our New York State law. These are businesses that are a part of this program, and they're able to contract with our governmental entities to provide services. So they're having a conference, and one of the key things is the Southern Tier, which is what we're a part of, has been historically underrepresented for the last 6 years in this space. And so we're looking to elevate our businesses, whether they're MWBEs, small businesses, very small businesses, and they don't have to be minority-led. We're just looking for businesses that could use the exposure so that we can enfranchise this part of the region and provide businesses with more exposure. So if you are aware of an MWBE, a small business, a very small business that could use this exposure, that can be a part of the conference in March, please reach out to me. The committee members are comprised of business leaders of colors, Unbroken Promise Initiative, and I can never say this name, but I want to make sure that I say it properly. If you can give me 1 second. The Muldrow Group, which is also a part of the Southern Tier, they're a business in the Southern Tier. Those are the committee members as well as myself. And so if you're interested, please reach out. But the most important thing is for you to uplift the business that you're connected to so that we can get exposure and provide them with an opportunity to network and perhaps contract with other businesses in New York State. Lastly, the diversity and inclusion policy update. I'd like to keep you guys abreast of what is happening on that front. JEDI members created an ad hoc committee and went through a extensive equity lens retreat. And that retreat allowed for us to update the policy, not only with new language, but with what's actually happening at the county right now and where we see the county in the next 10 years through the guidance of the strategic plan. That is being updated so that it's readable for everyone, and folks who are a part of that policy review process are able to engage in the policy in a way that's nice and neat and clean. We went through the retreat, and as you would know, the retreat caused a lot of different notes and things that we want folks to have their voices heard, but we want to make sure we streamline the process. So we're in the process of doing that now, and I just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys a heads up around that. As of now, I think that is my update.
Fantastic. Thank you for that robust update. Questions or comments for Charlene? Annie.
Can you tell me again, so thanks for all that information. Charlene, could you tell me again how we would nominate enterprises for the minority and women-owned enterprise?
Right now, you can just send me the business information, their name, if they have a website, their phone number. The committee is in the process of developing our criteria and, you know, all of the nuances of choosing an entity. And we don't have that right now, but for us to collect businesses, please provide us with that business information. You can easily email it to me.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Other questions or comments for Charlene? All right, thank you for bringing all of this, and it's exciting to hear the progress on everything, especially the institutionalizing equity report. Next, Team JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion update. We've got Rachel and Dr. Clark, the co-chairs, both here. We'll pass it to you both. I see Rachel, so Rachel first.
So yeah, as Charlene said, we finished up our first round of reading and discussion group. That was really great. It was pretty well attended. And I'm excited to see the data from the surveys to see how we did and what people thought. So we have started talking about, as she said, what it would look like to either use that same curriculum or build another curriculum similar to that to try to get a little more into, you know, we're throwing a lot of ideas around. So one idea is like going department to department just to try to engage more of our colleagues in these discussions and building capacity around these things. So we're looking into our options there. We continue to work on our marketing campaign. Our next steps are to work on a storyboard. So that's what we'll be working on soon. And what else do I have? I think that's it for now. Unless I'm missing something. Ken, feel free to chime in if there's something I'm missing.
I think you covered everything pretty well.
Yeah, the only other thing I have in my notes, Charlene already covered with her update.
Yes, and another thing to note is that JEDI spent the last year identifying its scope in the new landscape of equity and diversity at the county, with the goal of embedding equity versus the racial equity lens that was once present. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. So I'd like to highlight that Jedi members, first want to say thank you to all the folks who are committed. They're very much committed, and their department heads who have loaned them to us as the departmental commitment to Jedi and E&D at the county. I'd like to highlight that some of our Jedi members have actually said that they've had conversations with their department heads, and this is their department's commitment. So I'd like to honor that. Excuse me. The second thing is that our Jedi members are working on ad hoc projects. And right now, based on those ad hoc projects, we're naming the committees. But moving into our second year, we're seeking to identify these committees through the scope of our institutionalizing equity report and our framework. So we're looking to align in year 2, but year 1, we were able to work on ad hoc projects such as our policy analysis, our reading and discussion groups, and our communications plan. So right now, the 3 committees are communication, education, and training, and policy analysis, policy review. So I'd like to highlight that in this moment. And then additionally, with our reading and discussion group, we're looking to tailor the curriculum to departmental scope. That was the conversation that we had. So if we went department by department, our reading and discussion group would look different for youth services versus highway. And we wanted to make sure that we tailored that so folks were engaging in the content in a way that was specific to their scope of work.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Team Jedi? I have a couple. The simpler one for the reading and discussion groups, have you thought about making the time jump around, and would that be doable? I know, speaking as just one unusual employee, I never ended up making it to any of them, and it was mainly because of the time. And if it jumped around, I probably would have made it to like 1, but
this one specifically, we wanted it to be like a brown bag lunch thing, and we wanted to be able to include as many people during their lunch breaks to come participate as possible. So it was 12 to 2 to allow the 12 to 1 and the 1 to 2 groups to be able to come as they were able. And we definitely have discussed moving the times around. And if we did department to department, that would be conversations with each department on what works best for getting the most amount of people to show up each time we do it. Yeah.
Thanks. I imagine attendance from different departments is going to vary, based on interest, but also based on the nature of someone's work and shift, and does it lend themselves to showing up to a lunchtime thing or not? Yeah. Lisa.
I'll just say grateful testimonial as someone who has a crazy schedule. The flexibility that was offered this time around allowed me to participate in at least one part of one discussion, and for that I was grateful, because in the past it was always a commitment that you had to commit to the 4 weeks or however long, all of the sessions, and I was never able to participate. So I was glad to at least be able to be there for part of it. So thank you.
Awesome. That is good to hear. My other question was hearing you talk about Jedi having looked inward at its own structure and scope, which is something that WDIC is beginning to do. I guess we have that for WDIC as a discussion later on, but would it be helpful, and could we have some sort of a WDIC Jedi joint meeting? I want to know, what do folks think? And by folks, actually, I mean specifically non-elected county staff on both or either committee. I want to hear from.
I mean, I know that's something we've been talking about for a while and never actually made happen. So I don't know if, I mean, I feel like it would make more sense to invite folks from WDIC to a Jedi meeting than to ask Jedi folks to come to a WDIC meeting.
Yeah, I guess, I said joint meeting and I would like to walk it back because the rules are different. Maybe a meeting with a bunch of people from both, which would probably look like WDIC folks being invited to a Team Jedi meeting.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea.
It's not going to be a WDIC, the public committee following open meetings laws making decisions. That would not be happening.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll look into that. We have a meeting this coming Friday, so we can talk about it. We can put it on the agenda to discuss and see if we can. So typically for last year, we met the third Friday of every month, from 1 to 3.
1:30 to
1:30 to 3. So I think we'll probably keep that schedule just since that's worked pretty well so far. So yeah, we'll keep you posted. We'll send an email, let you guys know.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being willing to invite us. And that time generally works for me personally, can't speak for others. Other Team Jedi related questions or comments? Going once, twice, gone. And next we move into our list of discussion items. First, briefly, the membership discussion, just an update on membership of this committee. There are 13 seats on this committee, of which right now 10 are filled and 3 are vacant. So we do need to recruit more people. And as I said, Lisa and Ken's terms are ending at the end of this calendar year, so that will be another 2 vacancies. So I guess I'd welcome both exhort people to find new members and welcome any thoughts on how to find new members or thoughts of, constituencies' interest in the diversity and inclusion of the Tompkins County workforce that are currently not represented or not represented well enough on this committee. In terms of the makeup of WDIC is involving legislators and staff and community members. The way our bylaws break that down is of the 13 seats, 2 are specifically legislator seats, 2 are staff member seats, and 2 are community member seats, and the other 7 are undesignated. And all of our vacancies are or will be undesignated seats. So we're gonna have at least 2 staff, 2 community members, 2 legislators, and 2 more people also staying on. But so the new folks could come from any of those 3 groups, or really, although the legislators get assigned through our own process that's attached to the legislature committee process. So really, I think we're looking for staff members or community members, and in this moment, the counts don't matter because our minimums are already achieved. Annie.
Thanks, Veronica. I'm wondering, would it be helpful to have someone do a write-up that we could send out to all employees and maybe do a press release, or maybe ask Dominic how to get the word out into the wider community?
In the next 2 days.
Yeah, you have 48 hours for Dominic's input. Yeah, I like that idea. Are we allowed to put out a press release seeking committee members? I have this vague memory that someone said they were once told they couldn't at a certain time, but this might be fabricated. I just want to check.
There's been press releases done for advisory boards in the past, so yes, you can.
Okay, great.
And if I could just add, I meant that in addition to reaching out to people, that we would like to personally ask. I know that that's, helpful because sometimes people need to be personally asked because they might not see it or they don't see themselves as, for some reason, contributing. But I wouldn't want to do just that because I would, sometimes you have the perception and maybe the practice of just tapping people that are maybe like-minded or whatever, but I just would I'm just trying to push for all advisory boards to, and all boards to make sure they go out and do more outreach.
That's a good point, thanks. I also know, for me personally, I'm more likely to say yes to a thing or sign up for a thing if I've been informed of it more than once. Just, if someone invites me to join something I've never heard of, I might be like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm not ready to say yes. But if I already saw a press release about it, and then maybe someone comes talks, I'll say, oh yeah, I saw that thing. That did seem interesting. Is sending an email to all county staff something that Lisa could do? Thank you.
I'm just looking for people to apply through the process, and if they have questions, they could reach out to you, Veronica? Is that...
Yes. Yeah. I guess, yeah, asking people, saying Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee is seeking new has 3 going on 5 vacancies, is seeking new members. And maybe, I know we've talked about the lack of blue collar employees on this committee, the current, I think, lack of non-management employees on this committee. So maybe that might worth specifying, especially blue collar and or non-management. And say it's open, committee membership is open to, I guess, literally everyone of working age. Or I assume there's age limits somewhere. I don't know, not important. Annie, is that a new hand?
No, that's old. Sorry.
All good. Any other membership comments, questions, thoughts? Seeing none, let's move into discussing the scope of the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee. I'm just reading verbatim off my agenda. So, as you all know, we've identified the need to rethink what WDIC's role is or should be and how it can and most effectively serve that, and should it be restructured, given that in the 19, 20, 18 years-ish since it was formed, its structure has not significantly been revisited, even though the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the rest of that ecosystem within Tompkins County has changed significantly, in large part stemming from the work of WDIC members in the past. So, I think I'm very open to input and suggestions on how to have this discussion now. I don't think that coming up with an answer of this is what WDIC should be in this meeting is realistic. I think some things we could come away with are answers to what do we need to know to make the decision of how WDIC should look, and who decides how WDIC should look. And maybe also, or maybe this is part of an answer to the first question of what do we need to know, is what do we want WDIC to do? And I've got some notes from past discussions. I would identify that a role for WDIC has already been named earlier in this meeting, and that it'd be a place to, I think, likely publicly receive departmental reports on their setting and achieving our progress toward equity goals. And I think that's all that came up today. So what else do we want WDIC to do? What info do we need? Who decides? Or let me know if you want me to pull up more starting thoughts from a previous discussion, but I'm happy to stop talking. Nick.
Thanks, Veronica. I'm very interested in knowing, I don't have the answers to this. This is rhetorical / like interested in if anyone else has the answer to this question. But like, what does WDIC as our specific platform and makeup, is there anything that we have the ability to do as an advisory board, or I know that language is kind of newly being put out there for us, new / old, but I'm curious to know basically what do we have the ability to do that, say, JEDI doesn't, or say, right, some of the other adjacent or similar DEIJ working committees or organizations can't do that maybe we can. Again, I'm putting that out there as this kind of big rhetorical-ish question, because then maybe if we can answer that, then we could know how to like use that power in a way, or like to continue to like foster that specific, that really we have the responsibility and ability to do.
Thanks, Nick. Kate.
Yeah, I think just to kind of follow off what Nick was saying, I think it's the clarification of roles, maybe. Is that sort of what you were getting at? Like, what actually is the expectation and what is the scope of, what do we actually have the power to do, I think would be really interesting. I think there is the acknowledgement that there is legislators and staff, whether those are management, not whatnot. So I think that would be a conversation that probably needs to be had. Again, I would like to continue to see our committees, Health and Human Services, Government Operations, really sort of adopt some of the practices that we are having with updates from our department heads, especially around equity measures. I think that would be really important if they would be willing to have that conversation. And I mean, I think the structure of itself, for me, is not problematic. I just think it's more communication. And I think having smaller groups, maybe aside from this meeting, who would be able to talk about some of those issues and come back with recommendations or, thoughts to further the group conversation in these meetings would be helpful.
Thanks, Kate. Can I ask you to clarify what you said about wanting to see the program committees like HHS?
I just think I think it's important that we have metrics here, right? We want to know how department heads are doing, but I also think it's important for example, Health and Human Services, when we talk about what are our goals for the year, they should also be asking what are these metrics and how are we doing on them, so that it does begin to embed and gives a shared language in different places. So it's not just, And I think that's especially important given that this is an advisory board. I think it just reiterates and again reaffirms the importance of this in different spaces. So, and obviously that's a larger conversation than I can simply say, but I think that's important, at least to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you. Other thoughts, questions to pose? Something that just came to my mind is, would it make sense to try to have members of WDIC also, I guess maybe I'm thinking of more of legislators, but be members of certain committees or be like attend certain other legislative committees or other things people should go to. For instance, one thing I thought was a little odd when I realized it is that even though the program committee the WDIC officially reports to is Budget, Capital, and Personnel, but I think in the last 5-ish years, there has not been a legislator who served on both, even though legislators are typically serving on like 3-4 committees, or 2, it depends. That's weird. I think it's weird. I could see it being useful to have someone who's actively involved in these meetings and actively involved in making decisions in the BCP meetings. That's just an example, and I'm wondering, because I'm offering that as another avenue of question asking or answering, are there other places that we'd want to see cross-representation? I'd say Team Jedi is definitely another one. I don't think we need to worry about losing that, but I want to acknowledge that's valuable as well. Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and I think it would only be helpful if there was someone serving on both WDIC and Budget, Capital, and Personnel. I don't know how you would make that happen, but I think that would be useful. And it is in Jedi's scope that Jedi wants at least 2 members of Jedi to serve on WDIC. And, that's just for consistency, and it's helpful.
That makes sense. Can you remind me roughly how many members does Jedi have?
It's close to 30.
About 30.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty big.
Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to maybe have other members that sit on other committees come and sort of be a liaison during specific discussions? Like if we knew throughout the year we were going to be talking about, you put in whatever topic and it made sense for somebody from Government Operations Committee to come. Maybe not a voting member, but then they could hear what we were saying and go back, and so that way they wouldn't have to come to all of the meetings. I mean, not that we have a lot of meetings, too many, but.
I like that idea. Nick?
Yeah, that point that Kate just brought up reminds me of, I think it was earlier this year, forgive me if I'm mixing up with last year. Time is a construct. But when we had Chris Spahn from Workforce, actually, I think this was last year, when we had Chris Spahn come in and present, and I know like this is memorable to me because I co-presented with it, but the accessibility documents and the disability resource coordinator that works within the workforce department and system. For me, that was kind of nice. Again, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn because I worked on that project, but it was nice having sort of an outside/inside person, someone who works within our actual institution, right, come and talk about something that is adjacent / highly relevant, connected to DEI, to literally work for force, diversity, and inclusion. And for me, at least, that has sort of stuck. I've noticed a few times at different points, like, we've made reference to that, even though I think that was like over a year ago. I can't remember. I think I've been part of this committee now for almost 3 years at this point, but I can't remember necessarily another person coming to speak with us in that capacity. And I know what we were just discussing is almost the opposite, where like somebody would come and listen and then take back notes. But I think a combination, like of like, what is this department working on that crosses into or is within the DEIJ lens? We kind of welcome them and celebrate the work they're doing, and almost have like a maybe almost like workshop type, or at least just like a back and forth Q&A could be really, could be really beneficial. And not that this would happen every meeting. I think that's unrealistic, but I think it might be interesting.
Charlene.
Nick, I love that idea. So I'm going to remind everyone, so we don't duplicate processes, that you will already, as WDIC moving into 2025, you would already have some autonomy over folks coming to present to you. So the goal would be like, what would be the process in which you would like for our departments to report their equity indicators and the work that they're doing in relation to the equity indicators over the course of 2025. So duplicating that would be cumbersome, right? Like, I don't know if that would be smart for our time. So maybe refocusing what you're saying, because you're spot on, but like refocusing that and using the systemic structure that's being created to facilitate that. I just want to remind everyone that that is the direction that we've decided that we will move into for 2025. So you would have to develop that process, though.
Thanks, Charlene, and thanks, Nick. Yeah, I totally agree with the value of having someone like, in this case, the Workforce Development Director, come and talk about something very related. So I wonder if, as we co-create the processes for departments to come and report their equity indicators to WDIC, if we can also keep in mind the value of the presentations on the work that they're doing, which might be like completely overlapped or maybe not quite, or in the value of the back and forth. And at least I could imagine intentionally creating space for more of a dialogue with, say, a department head who chooses to come to a meeting and present in person as opposed to some other choice. Kate.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that when I was talking about people coming from like other committees, I was talking about legislators coming, not necessarily just regular folks, because that would be a way for them to hear and then take back to their committees, and a way to sort of cross-pollinate, sort of them understanding what we're doing and maybe how they can incorporate that into their committees. So I agree with Nick. And I think also Charlene has got a good point. I just want to make sure that I was talking about legislators coming.
Thanks. Thank you for clarifying. That is how I interpreted what you said. Thanks for clarifying. Other thoughts? I guess to summarize, what I've got down now is we want to identify what WDIC currently has the ability to do that no other committee or board or Team Jedi does. We want to acknowledge that the overall structure of WDIC is probably fine with like the staff and legislators and community members, but we need to name that, and that people are coming with different roles and in a context of different power dynamics and decision-making dynamics in this organization, certainly between the legislators and the staff. Heard a desire to also have the other committees, the program committees, hear equity updates from departments. We noted potential importance of cross-representation with members of WDIC also being members of other things. JEDI already does this. Noted a desire for legislators from other committees or legislators who aren't on WDIC, or maybe especially from committees that none of the legislators on WDIC are on, to come to a WDIC meeting sometimes to see what it is we're talking about, and in particular, if it's on a topic that's relevant to that committee. Also noted the value of having other staff from inside the organization who aren't on WDIC coming to this meeting, which many will be doing anyway, to present their equity indicators and goals in 2025 and beyond. And that's what I've got written down. Do folks have other things you'd want to know when thinking about the structure? Oh, and the one other thing I have is I think there was a desire expressed to have people from WDIC go off in smaller groups to work on some of these like scope defining things and come back with recommendations, essentially do like subcommittee work between meetings, if I'm understanding right, which I'd be very on board with. What would folks like to add or disagree with or propose? Charlene.
I know I'm not a member, but I do want to just state, I'm going to be Captain Obvious right now. When WDIC was first created, it was created to solve a problem, right? And so the problem was solved in some cases because an infrastructure was built and folks started moving the work forward and things started to happen because of that problem-solving nature of WDIC. So being Captain Obvious, what is the problem that WDIC would like to solve? Because that is the reason why it was created in the first place, and in authenticity and, just sticking with the scope. Maybe there's another problem that needs to be solved, and WDIC could be the conduit for that.
That is a great question.
I also think that looking at the bylaws and sort of what the scope of work is laid out there, if the desire is to change that a little bit or to add additional things, that would be, I think, important to sort of solidify and make it concrete.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Would anyone like to try to identify what problem what problem are you imagining that exists right now that WDIC would be trying to solve? I had something jump to mind, but I don't want to speak first. Lisa?
I think now that we have policies in place, procedures, accountability measures, equity goals and indicators, it's perhaps one function or problem or is the the accountability piece or the measurement of where we've been and where we're going, and also how will we know when we've gotten there, or maybe there is no getting there, but looking at those, reviewing those indicators and maybe even working to develop what the indicators are and the measurements that we're wanting to utilize.
Thank you. Anyone else? That went in a totally different direction than what I was thinking, even though I think that that is a problem, sort of, you said it better, but it's like and then what to the structure and procedures that we've set up. A thought that came to my mind is that our policies and procedures, and even the presence and work of a chief equity and diversity officer, and all of that seems to be fairly consistently, while it may be consistently connected to the work of the county departments generally, it's not necessarily connected enough to the legislature, or not in a way that has the power to influence how legislators make decisions. And so now I'm not saying that WDIC itself is doing that either, but I think an arm of connection, I guess a problem I'm identifying is that to some extent, our legislature is free to choose to not necessarily pay as much attention to the way the county does things as we expect our department heads and others to pay attention to it. And a hybrid board like this with legislators and others could perhaps address that problem.
Are there any other municipal governing bodies that have a good system that we know about? So we could kind of look at what they do, how their governing body holds themselves accountable, and then how that trickles down. Maybe that's a question for Charlene, I don't know.
Yes, we are members of the GARE Network, which is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and there's a ton of municipalities that are working on governance as well as organizational structure. A part of the governance is really diversifying the legislature and or governing body to represent cross sections of the community that they serve. San Diego is actually one of them. Houston, Texas is another. You mentioned the town of North Carolina. There are a lot of, in Chicago, one of the gentlemen actually who was a candidate for a position came from a town in the outskirts of Chicago that also worked on this. So it's about how you want to approach it and who looks like us demographically and socioeconomically and politically. who looks most like us and then adopting it. But GARE's network has a lot of resources, and we would have to go down the rabbit hole to see who we mirror.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just will add to that in one of my GARE sessions at the conference, it was during the session on equity-centered coaching, and someone asked toward the end of the session, they were looking for ideas for how to, because they're talking about coaching department heads and people doing the work in those departments. And someone raised the question, well, how do you train your elected officials, and how do you train your boards and your legislatures? And there were crickets in the room, and everyone, like even the folks from San Diego, were kind of like, let us know when you figure that out. So I think that's a challenge for a lot of people, a lot of different places. Certainly worth looking into GARE to see what ideas people have shared, but I think that we'll find that that's a challenge a lot of places.
Thank you. I would like to learn more about what the folks are doing, though. Charlene.
I think as a starting point for influence at our organization and with our legislature could be the formatting in which we update every legislative meeting. People are looking to see what WDIC is doing, what JEDI is doing. I get stopped in the community about certain updates, about different topics that are happening in this realm. And so a really poignant format for updates can have a significant influence on our community members as well as our legislature, especially because our legislature is very much motivated with their hearts, right, about their constituents and the people that they serve. Another tool that I would like to throw out there as well is that GIS really worked very hard on providing us with data based on each legislative district. And the data is 4 pages long over a 10-year period about what each legislative district is comprised of in terms of what we call a diversity index. So I think we should just start there, right? Like highlighting all the things that we already have access to and using that as some of the influence that we might be looking for, along with, like Kate said, looking for an organization that we mirror and a board that we mirror, that we might be able to use some of their approaches as resources.
Thank you. Yeah, that reminds me, Charlene, you mentioned the diversity index map to me while we were at Facing Race, and I embarrassingly hadn't heard of it previously. So I don't know what I slept on there, but I still haven't gone to look at it. So where can we find such a thing?
If you go onto ITS's website and click on census, it's underneath the census link on the left-hand side. So if you go to ITS, it is fairly easy to find. And when you click on it, it's interactive. You can go by district. If you hover over each index, it provides you with a narrative around the data. It's very sophisticated, and I thank you to the GIS team and ITS for working on that.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Okay. Anyone have any other thoughts to bring into this discussion?
Does the city have any committee that talks about DEI stuff? I'm just wondering if there's any collaboration efforts there that might be. Is there a space where just kind of
Charlene, you're nodding your heads.
Yes, the council has a DEI advisory committee. The name of it is escaping me, but I can send it to you via Teams. They do have a committee that meets monthly, I believe.
Who's it made up of?
I think it's made up of community members, and maybe it might be similar to our structure: 2 council members, community members, and staff, if I'm not mistaken. But I will get more information about that. But I am aware that they do have a diversity council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you. So for us now, this has been a helpful discussion, and I've got down a bunch of notes. And what are our next immediate steps after this meeting with respect to the sorting out the scope of WDIC? I mean, I guess one small thing is that at some point Team Jedi is going to invite us to a meeting to be sorted out on their timeline. Charlene?
I just Googled it, so you all know, because I didn't want to lie to you guys. Ithaca, the city of Ithaca has a workforce diversity advisory committee, and it looks like it is comprised of community members and staff, from the city manager to the youth bureau director, human resources, the liaison, and the chief of police are their staff. And then other community members are comprised of the membership of that group. The Workforce Diversity Advisory Committee.
WDAC. All right, thank you. So what immediate next steps for us does anyone suggest? The idea of forming ad hoc subcommittees of some kind to work on some of these questions and info gathering outside of meetings had come up. Is that something that people are willing to participate in?
I would be happy to. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a long-term thing, like we're going to keep these committees forever, but I do think it would behoove us to have some conversations, and at least in the immediate short term, to decide what we want to do.
Yeah, no, I'm not imagining these being permanent, but like in the next, I don't know how to estimate time, but in this current process of what do we want WDIC to be, that should not be constantly on the front burner forever. So, help me out here. Should some of us just agree to meet offline to figure out next steps, sort of discuss, have a recap from everything we discussed here?
I have to step off for another meeting, but I would be happy to meet with you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate. Well, we can start there. Would anyone else be willing to have a small meeting with me and Kate? Rachel? All right, any other takers? That is something to start, so thank you. Future ideas welcome at any time, but right now let us move on to the flying of flags at county buildings. This is on the agenda to be mentioned, and so that the current flag policy could be included in the packet, but I wasn't meaning to have a super involved discussion about the flag policy. Just a reminder that if you had suggestions or edits to the flag policy, hopefully, oh, see, now I'm forgetting who we were supposed to send them to. Trina?
Bridget.
Okay, yeah, send it to Bridget Nugent, Deputy County Administrator. So if anyone's got things to send and hasn't, now's the time. Or did anyone have any brief flag policy related thoughts that you wanted to share in this public setting? Nick.
This is not all that serious, and I'm not trying to diminish the importance of the flag policy, but I read through quite a bit of it when it was sent, and now I can't stop noticing flags all over the community and like looking to see if they are correct. So I guess very interesting reading material, but I do not have any changes to suggest.
Delightful, thank you. A thought I had only in this meeting, but not to open a can of worms, is whose input overall goes into, I guess, the flag policy for the county? Like, could potentially any employees give input? I guess they can at the end of the line, or could the public in some way give input? I think for a lot of our county policies that wouldn't necessarily make sense, but the flags are public facing, and it's in my brain because we just talked about all this public engagement with government decisions things. I guess I'm looking at Lisa because I anticipate you might be like, that is a whole piece of work that no one wants to take on, but.
Are you looking for public input into the flag policy in particular? Is that what you're?
I'm asking if that's at all would be like relevant or doable, reasonably doable.
It's not anything that we have done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that this is, the public input is relevant in this case, I guess we could try to incorporate it, but I'm just not sure. It's not something that we've done in the past or that I've thought about, but I could give it thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it won't matter depending where the flag policy lands. I'm just thinking, like, we've had at various times members of the public come and give their input about flags we are or aren't flying, and that will probably happen anyway, I suppose.
In this policy in particular, there's a federal flag code that we would have to follow as a public entity, flying flags at public buildings, but then I think there's a lot of discretion about the other types of flags that are flown, and that's where we were looking for originally for that guidance, and for particularly around flags commemorating particular months and celebrations and so forth. But whether or not to fly another nation's flag, if we're going to, there are certain federal flag code things that we would need to comply with. Whether or not to do it is more of a discretionary consideration of the legislature.
Right, that makes sense. And as a reminder for anyone watching, one of the questions in this review of the flag policy was what to incorporate about flying flags of other countries, because that is an issue that has come up since the policy was created, and it sounds like it was not anyone's focus when the flag policy was originally created. Anything else about flags?
I just have a question.
Yes.
Input to Bridget is due by when?
It was, as a surprise, due like weeks ago, but also is being accepted now. Do you know?
I don't know the timeline of this.
Okay. That's fine.
As soon as you can. I think maybe the flag policy is going to be discussed at a future Government Operations Committee meeting, but I don't know exactly which one. And they just had one last week, right? Yes. Okay.
Prior to it being considered by committees, it usually goes out for organizational review with a deadline and a date on it. So I'm not sure that that's gone out yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Okay.
All right. Anything else about flags? Moving on to committee members' reports. Does anyone have any updates or reports relevant to the work of WDIC you'd like to share? Going once? Twice? Gone. All right. If there's no other business, can I have a motion to adjourn, even though I don't need it? Rachel, Annie seconds. All in favor of adjourning? Just hands. Yes. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening.